All right, troops, strong and conditioned, live and direct from the patio of pain, or the Chateau du Burpee. I like to change it up on a regular basis. And tonight I am very honoured. I'm always honoured to have my guests on, but I'm particularly honoured to have this gentleman on because he's a very original chap in the YouTube scene. One that has caught my eye quite a while ago, and he's a very hard man to get a hold of, like others that I've spoken to. Never answers these messages. It's the supreme athlete, Mr. Performance himself. It's Alec from Enkiri Elite Fitness. How are you, Alec, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, mate. I'm just, I'm nursing I got an injury today, actually. I was showing a person in the gym an overhead press with very light weights, and I felt a searing pain shoot up my upper back. And I thought, I've did something wrong here. Something's went a bit crazy. And you know that grim reality when you injure yourself through something innocuous, because you'll know yourself, it tends not to be the training that injures you. It tends to be the mundane activity, such as picking a handkerchief off the floor, for example.
Right. I would tend to agree with that. Either it's something mundane or it is a light warm-up weight. You never get injured when I personally never gotten injured on a max attempt. Never have I gotten injured on a hard working set. Every time I've gotten injured, it was, okay, I'm going to hit whatever. I'm going to squat 400 pounds for 10 reps today. Oh, crap. I strained my adductor warming up with 300 before I could get to 400 or something similar like that. I've strained an erector muscle on a front squat it was when I was squatting very frequently, a time many years ago. And it was, man, I had been doing something like front squatting 375 every single time I would go in the gym. That particular day, I got injured with 200 some pounds. So it's always exactly something mundane or something that you are not anticipating being even mentally like concerned about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's actually a key point, because when you are moving the lighter weights, and it's probably to your detriment, but you're not focused. It's bread and butter, so you just see it as a warm up.
Right.
When you're moving maximal weight or close to maximal weight, on the other hand, you are locked in. You are scared of injury to a certain degree, so you have that mindset. So it's always the stupid wee things, as we say in Scotland, that catch you unaware. So that's been my day, and I'm having trouble turning my head at this point. I feel like Kurt Angle right now. Like after a 20-year career in wrestling, when he has to turn like that. Like he can't actually turn his head round without a searing pain shut the back of his neck.
Well, I hope you feel better soon. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. You know that way, like you start to catastrophize an injury, and you think, "Oh, I've slipped a disc. I've got a bulging disc. Oh, I think I'll be paralyzed by the time I wake up tomorrow morning. What's going to happen here?"
Yeah, catastrophizing is something I have dealt with certain breeds of clients that I've worked with, and obviously it's good to have like a healthy fear, right, of being injured, and maybe that's something that I've personally not had enough of, as a healthy fear, or of being injured or of actually being hurt. But the ruminating on it and not being able to focus on anything else, or not being able to think about the positive of how you can work your way out of it and that kind of thing, it's something I've dealt with. It can be challenging for sure.
Yeah. And for me, it's always the initial mental impact before your brain starts to get used to the injury.
Right.
Because ultimately, what we are thinking is that I'm never going to train again. Like my training career is now officially over.
Right.
I'm going to lose the one thing that keeps me sane.
That's what it is too. Well, it can definitely be hard, especially because you're going from, well, I could just do all these kinds of physical feats 10 seconds ago, and now I'm completely incapacitated. So that's a difficult change in mindset to have to deal with.
Absolutely. So what's your approach to injury? Like, how do you deal with an injury, Alec?
Uh, with myself, I honestly I have not had any real injuries in quite some time. So historically, I would rest. Obviously the severity is important. It depends on how hurt you are. It depends on what you have hurt. But typically, what I would do is just kind of rest through that acute phase or whatever, and then I would start back up always with I would find what can I do right now, and then I would find things that aren't going to bother me, that aren't going to make it worse, and I would hit those as well as I could and kind of expand from there. Like I said, I haven't really been hurt in years at this point, so I have helped people rehabilitate. So I have kind of I've kind of developed a repertoire, so to speak, of tactics. And what I would do, what I kind of lean more towards now is I never really want total rest if we can help it. What I initially will try to do is say somebody strains a muscle, movement, right? Getting as much blood flow into the area as you can. So if you've strained, in your case, you strained your erector or your upper back or your neck or whatever it is, maybe any kind of, if you could help it, if it's not searing pain for you, maybe like completely unloaded, but just, moving the neck around right now. They're essentially the same as what you would do for a neck extension. And the point would just be blood flow, right? And so you would start at the highest level that you can where there is no pain. And you just do that as often as you can. And as the pain fades away, like it will do if you're not constantly re-aggravating the injury, then you just gradually bump the intensity up. But in my experience, it's really keeping doing what you can and keeping working the injured area tends to be what's very effective for not just getting rid of the pain, but hopefully ensuring that that kind of thing doesn't happen again. Because the best predictor of an injury is a previous injury, right? Like with hamstring strains, for example. If an athlete has strained a hamstring, that's like one of the greatest indicators that an athlete will in the future again strain a hamstring. But in my opinion, a lot of that really comes down to the fact that we lean too much on total rest after an injury rather than a proactive rehab type of mindset and type of approach. And I think that can really make all the difference, honestly.
Yeah,
I
no, I absolutely agree with you. However, my approach personally is based on it's insanity. There's an insane element to my recovery techniques, so to speak, and I usually tend to seek solace in the hot water bottle. I don't know if that's we call it a hot water bottle in Scotland. It's something that you would fill with a kettle.
Okay.
It's like a big bag, and you put it in your bed at night to heat the bed up.
Okay. So just like heat therapy, essentially.
Yeah. Anytime I've had a back injury, I've just whacked a hot bottle on it because I feel that I don't have any science behind it. And I think the idea of putting an ice pack on my back, it doesn't make sense to me, although conventional wisdom would suggest that that is the right thing to do. But I've always found that something like a hot water bottle just kind of eases the pain. It's almost like it promotes blood flow to the muscle. Yeah,
right.
and it makes the muscle.
It kind of leans along that same concept I was talking about, blood flow.
Yeah. It makes the muscle feel more pliable in some respects.
Right.
So I tend to find that works for me, but there's a degree of what we call an old wives' tale attached to that.
Sure, a lot of things we do have that.
Yeah. Sometimes they work, obviously, but I don't have a hot water bottle. I've lost my hot water bottle, so I'm going to have to suffer in silence. Yeah, I bought some, Tiger Balm.
I do, yes.
I bought Tiger Balm, but I can't get it on because it's like so far back. I'm going to have to get a back scratcher or something like that.
Probably.
And I didn't want to get my 4-year-old to put it on my back because she wouldn't have understood the concept of having deep heat in her hands and wondered where the burning sensation
oh man
is coming from. So
Well, if you do that, be sure to film it, send it to me. I'll be curious to see.
oh, injuries suck, man. They really do suck. They
They
take away
do.
your skills. So Alex, that was a brief detour from my opening question, which I like to ask
Okay.
my guests is, Alec, can you explain your training journey? Can you just go through it briefly and we can start to build on that?
So when if you're talking about me, like what
Yeah.
I post on YouTube, what you see on like my Instagram, that kind of thing, I would say at this point, so I'm 35, at this point in my life, my goal, my primary goal, is to stay as athletic as I possibly can for as long as I possibly can. So
Right.
my goal right now is hold on to, like, I posted a video the other day of just me doing a bunch of jumps and sprints and heavy lifts and all that kind of stuff. My goal, keep that as close to that ceiling that it's at right now for as long as I can. So everything that I do in my own training is kind of centered around that concept. So at this point, you'll still see heavy strength work, heavy lifting, right? But you'll also see a lot of running. You'll see a lot of jumping. You'll see a lot of lower intensity, what I would call prehab techniques, things that are so like I'll work I've put much more of a premium on working my abdominal muscles, but also at this point, but also working all the individual functions of my hips. So I focus on flexion, a thing that a lot of people ignore. I focus on hip adduction, hip abduction. I'll work the rotational capacities to different extents, throw a little bit of conditioning work in there as well with my running, and then different types of mobility drills as well. So everything, it really just boils down to maintaining these physical qualities that I have spent decades building now as best I can for as long as I can.
Yeah. Can I just add that when you spoke about you had just released a video of which looked like a highlight reel to me, and there was one thing that made me laugh, and it also made me like I might be a bit controversial here, Alec, but there was a scene where you jumped over a fence wearing a pair of denims or jeans.
Uh-huh.
Now, I've got two issues with that, one positive and one negative. The
Okay.
positive being that I like to work out in my jeans as well.
Okay.
I also like to make social media content working out in my jeans because I did it initially just out of boredom, and one of my friends texted me straight away and went, "I cannot believe you work out in your jeans. Why are you posting that?" And I thought that's actually quite funny. I'm going to start doing it more often because it gets a sort of reaction. So I liked that element, but that jump you did was wild, and I'm convinced there was a trampoline on the other side of the fence.
You'll never know, man.
Right, so you're leaving us with a hint, an air of
I'm leaving
mystery.
it. I'll say this: I filmed the side of the fence that you saw, and I filmed the back side of the fence too. But that's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna tell you what I did to get over the fence.
It was awesome. It was like something out an 80s Hollywood movie. Definitely.
So I don't even know how tall the damn fence is. I think it's taller than me. It's got to be around 6 feet tall. I
Deary
have
me.
jumped onto a 5-foot box before.
Right.
That was also in that same video, I believe. So,
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
of that what you will.
Right, okay. Well, I was impressed by obviously
Right.
by the jeans and the height of the jump. So
Right.
right, so let's go further back in your training journey. Let's talk about the origins of your training journey
Boy.
and how you got into said journey.
So it's kind of it's a long and winding road. So I originally started, I don't know, man. I always played sports. So that was kind of like what got me, like, it wasn't like I was a stranger to physical fitness or to athletics. But I was a stranger to the gym and to the weight room. So what I realized when I was about, I don't know, 17 years old is that I was very, very skinny. I was about the height I am now, but now I weigh about 170, 175 pounds. Back then, I was about 115, 120 pounds. So you can imagine I was pretty thin. So I wanted to put size on. I wanted to put some muscle onto my frame. just for no other reason than I didn't want to be quite so skinny. I didn't have the I didn't really have the concept of how I could segue that into enhancing my athleticism. I was decently fast already. I was a pretty good athlete. That kind of thing. And what happened was I just got into the gym. I did, or what I actually started out with was literally just push-ups and sit-ups. I didn't have any equipment yet. And I put a little bit of muscle on that way, and that kind of got me a little bit hooked. So what I did was I bought a weight set, just a bench. And now I switched from push-ups and sit-ups, and instead now I do bench press and dumbbell curls. And I do that probably every damn day. I don't know, something like that. And I put a little bit of muscle on that way as well. But by this point, I'm kind of like in it, right? I'm hooked on it because I saw I got stapled by a bench press, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, I crushed it, right? So now I'm like, oh my god, you can get stronger, and that just like set it off for me. So after that, I got into my college, and I started working out in the weight room there, and that was where I really started getting into things like squats and deadlifts and training like the lower body. And then I discovered the internet and all the abundance of information that was on there. And from there, I learned that you can, take these ideas of applying leg training, and you can use them to become a better athlete. And it really, I discovered it was called the Vertical Jump Bible. I think it was, what was his name? Damn, Kelly. Who's the man? I always get their names mixed. I think his name is Kelly Starrett. Or that's the physical. Is that the physical therapist guy? I can't remember, man. I can't remember his darn name. I feel bad. But anyway, the book was called the Vertical Jump Bible, and I still have it. It was an awesome book. Awesome, if for no other reason than it really is what taught me that you can take these concepts and you can even just improve your ability to jump higher, which was something that a concept you see on the internet a lot is that you can't improve your ability to jump higher. I know for a fact that you can because I've done it. And what taught me that, what opened my eyes to that, was that guy's book. But after that, I really started to explore the world of athletic enhancement, improving your athletic ability. And that's kind of how we just branched out from there, man. So I'm getting a little sidetracked, but I was really into strength training at that point. So then I discovered Olympic lifting. I got really into that for a little while. That helped me with learning about improving explosiveness, improving power output. After that, I got sucked into powerlifting for a little bit. I did compete in powerlifting competitions. That helped to teach me more about strength training and just like getting stronger and proper programming. And then I started getting on YouTube a little while after that. And that was where I kind of rediscovered my love, because I had been kind of sucked into that powerlifting world for a little while. Once I got back onto YouTube, it was kind of where I rediscovered my love for all things fitness, really. And then that's kind of just evolved from there over the last several years. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. One of the things that jumped out to me was getting pinched or pressed on the bench press. What weight was on the bar?
I honestly believe it was 145
pounds. That's actually not bad, because I had a similar experience, which is why I honed in on that comment you made, because my initial foray into the gym was using machines, because this was at the end of the 90s when machines were all the rage at this point, and it wasn't in the way that they're in the rage now. They were just in the rage because they looked different from like barbells and dumbbells. And I always remember going to a more spit and sawdust style gym and trying the bench press for the first time. And someone had put 50 kilos on the bar, which is probably about 120 pounds.
Yeah.
And I got completely crushed under that. And I thought I was strong because I was like repping out on a machine and thinking, I had no knowledge of training at this point, or it was very, very basic. And I thought, this is easy, man. And then I went to that gym and I get crushed under an Olympic bar, and it stuck with me. I'll never forget that. It was like a dose of reality just hitting me at that very moment. But it
How
was.
Old were you?
I was probably about 22 or 23 at the time. Okay. I'm a bit older, mate. I know I look younger, but
how old are you now?
I'm 45.
Oh wow, no, you look good, man. I wouldn't have guessed that. I was thinking late 30s is what I was thinking.
Well, I hope my wife watches this. I really hope my wife watches this. I think my camera's using AI to smooth out the wrinkles. You get that option on this software, by the way.
Oh, nice. I do that for me.
Right. But like you, it's a moment where you think, right, I need to do something about this. I need to change, I need to change the way. We all need to be crushed under that barbell.
As long as we make it out okay from it.
Yeah, yeah. But I also want to add, Alec, that your training, I have an affinity with to a certain degree, even though I don't train like you at all. And it's because you remind me of when I discovered the Joe DeFranco videos back
Okay.
in the late 2000s. That was another.
Another dude I followed. Yeah, man. I
Yeah,
follow him on Instagram, but yes, he was one of my inspirations back in the day for sure.
yeah,
Bled stuff I picked up from him.
yeah, I would put Joe up there in my top 3 of the most influential guys. In fact, Joe probably created the landscape of which gyms operate nowadays, that industrial unit style gym. Even things like the Bulgarian split squat. I'd never seen a Bulgarian split squat until I started watching Joe DeFranco's
Right.
uh, content. But now they're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere.
Right.
So that was my question. Were you influenced by the works of Joe DeFranco?
I sure as heck was. Yeah. So I think I discovered. Did you ever read or did you ever hear about the website T Nation, Testosterone Nation?
I know I post on the forums on T Nation to
Okay.
this day. I'm quite a regular
Okay.
contributor.
What I don't check out I used to browse or lurk the forums. I haven't checked on them lately. So like where do you post on there? Out of curiosity.
I don't post as often as I used to because I usually go on to read Jared Miller's posts. Jared's
Okay.
a guest that I've had on a couple of times. He's a friend of mine. He's just a very original guy in the training sphere, and I like to get him on because he's the way he puts across his ideas is phenomenal. But yeah, I read a lot of Joe DeFranco's articles on T Nation.
Right. Yeah, that was that. So that was exactly where I discovered him. That was where I picked up the idea of if you've seen me do like really basically as heavy as you can drag or push a sled. I picked that up from Joe DeFranco. I don't even remember, man. He would definitely be so after the guy who wrote the vertical jump book, he would definitely be, I would say, my second most influential in terms of that like athleticism, in terms of like building an athlete type of concepts.
Yeah.
Because he
And
really like. Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, I was just going to say, I assume you also seen the legendary training montage that he used to have up on YouTube. It was soundtracked with the song "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor," and it was just like a highlight reel of all these.
Yeah,
That was
not in quite some time, but that I remember that. So it kicks off as soon as the song starts to go. I think the guy drops like a trap. It's like a trap bar deadlift. I think it's like the first lift, and he drops it
yes,
at the top,
yes,
and then the song
yes.
jumps. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I actually recommend you go back and watch it at some point because it will make the hairs in the back of your neck stand up. To this day, it's probably one of the best training montages I've ever seen in my. It blows anything away that's made today.
Okay, I'll do
Because
that. Yeah, I had forgotten all about that video.
yeah, because there's a rawness to it. It's filmed on like a 2008 style camera phone,
Right.
and it's just intense. But back then, you had never seen that. Like you'd
That's
never seen
true.
anyone training like that. It was so fresh, and watching guys do strongman training in a gym setting.
Right.
So I'm talking too much here, Alex. It's you that's supposed to talk.
Sometimes I feel like I'm talking too much.
So what is it, Alex, that like drives you to like emphasize on the performance aspect of training?
I would say it's just that is what has been the most satisfying for me, the coolest thing to watch improve. So like, I've done it all, most of it at this point. I have put in my hours trying to get stronger. I've dabbled with conditioning, like pretty intense conditioning types of work. And then that kind of power, explosiveness, and just general athleticism concept as well. And every time you PR on something, for me, the one that gives me the most satisfaction is like if I can sprint faster, if I can jump higher, if my agility has improved, or even something like a power based movement, so like a loaded jump or a kettlebell swing or an Olympic lift variation or whatever. Those are the ones that for me have just been like they're what really keep the fire going or keep the fire lit the most intensely is what I would say. So that's what it is.
So when you speak about dabbling in intense conditioning, what is it that you actually mean? What is it that you have dabbled in?
So for me, it's never been anything like distance, right? So the most I've done, like in terms of if you want to call it distance running, would be like a 1 to 2 mile type of run and just improving my baseline on there. But even that, I've only ever done sporadically. So for me, what I tend to stick to is what I like the best, which is like extended shuttle type drills, like in the running sphere. So instead of I'm going to do a low intensity jog for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to do rounds of like hit style, essentially hit style training, but not quite full on sprinting. Like, so one thing, have you ever heard of it's called a 300-yard shuttle drill? So you get 2 cones, can't see my hands. You get 2 cones, you put them 30 yards apart, basically 30 meters apart, and you run it 10 times. You break for a few minutes and then you run it again. So that gets you 300 yards of total work. And obviously the goal is to cover that distance as fast as you can. But that gives you an idea of the type of like running thing that I would do. I've talked about on my YouTube channel something, so I call them density blocks, where I do loaded carries. And what I initially started doing was I would do a short distance just because that was all I had available to. So I was doing them. I started doing them in my driveway. I started doing them at this gym I was training at, where the turf field was like 25 yards. So you take what you've got available and you work with it. So what I was doing was I was doing heavy loaded carries for that short distance, sort of heavy. And I would just set a timer, 15, 20 minutes, and I would do as many carries as I could. So I would just rest as little as possible. Over time, I would just try to do more reps in the same chunk of time. And then I would very slowly increase the weights. So I made a video on that a few years ago. What I started doing more recently was lowering the load and then drastically extending the distance. So what I was doing last year, I bought a bunch of sandbags and I would throw the sandbag over my shoulder or bear hug it or whatever. I would take it however the hell I could just to make it as comfortable as you can possibly be with a sandbag. And I would carry it 400 or 800 meters without putting it down. So I was going into my street here. It's 400 meters. I would take it down. I would take it back. I would rest a couple of minutes, and then I would do it again. Similar to the other loaded carry concept, but now you have far less of a strength emphasis, and you end up with far more of not really like a sort of a cardiovascular benefit. Obviously, you're panting really hard by the end of these things, but there's a lot of muscular endurance benefits as well. As you can imagine, it becomes difficult to hold 50 or 60 kilograms on your shoulder for 5, 6, 7 minutes at a time without setting it down. So those are the kinds of things. Like I like to vary. I really like to lean on that loaded carry idea, but obviously you need to run too, in my opinion, to really max out your conditioning capacity.
Yeah. Do you ever do any like zone 2 style running, or like to build an aerobic base and go for 30-minute duration runs or above?
Nope. Can't do it. Don't have the temperament. It just bores the hell out of me, man.
Right. Okay. But do you not think that as a performance-based like fitness guy, that's something that you really should be taking on board? Because ultimately that's going to elicit a certain response, which is going to enhance the performance package.
That is quite possible. I'm not going to say that you're wrong. It's really it doesn't jive with me. So it's just I don't know, man. I'm more like I will put on a weight vest and I will speed walk for 30 or 40 minutes before I'll jog. And I don't know why. I can handle the walking. I can't I just psychologically I hate it just I'd rather just end it, man. I don't know. I can't do
Right.
it.
So like, have you ever tried it for a sustained period of time, or is it something that you've dipped your toe into and thought,
Mm,
I hate
di-
this shit, I cannot be bothered? Because I understand running is boring. Running is very boring.
I will say I've dipped my toe into it, into more extended, like what you're talking about now. I have more experience with slightly more intense but shorter runs. Like I said, like 1 or 2 miles at a time, like that type of thing. Um, which I feel for me kind of tells me all I need to know about how I feel about that type of work, basically. I don't feel I mean, yes, I'd probably get something out of it, but I don't know, man. I'm not seeing the glaring holes. So like I went, for example, I'll just give you an example. I hadn't picked up a tennis racket since 2010, basically. Okay, that's kind of a lie. I hit last summer. But prior to that, I hadn't picked up a tennis racket in 12, 13 years, right? A couple weeks ago, I was on a little vacation and there was a sports club and they had a bunch of tennis pros there, guys who work at the facility to teach tennis lessons and whatnot.
Yeah.
I I I got a couple of appointments there so I could play tennis with one of them. Haven't really played this sport in over a decade, and I was out there for over the course of I got to play 2 days in a row, and I was out on court for about 6 hours cumulatively. No problems at all, man. And
Yeah.
we got pretty intense with it. So do I think there's something to be gained? Yes, definitely. I will not deny that. Do I feel that I'm really missing anything? Not really.
Yeah, but like, it sounds quite. I don't know. There's just something that doesn't sit right with me in this
Yeah,
respect,
that's fine.
because I think that it's something that would potentially elevate your game to another level.
Okay.
Because, like, I always go by the tactical barbell base building system. Have you ever read Tactical Barbell?
I have not.
Right, okay. I recommend it. It's a great series of books. However, there's a conditioning part to the book, and there's a specific training program called base building, and it's geared towards guys who have been powerlifting and Olympic lifting and weights for years, who just want to try a new approach. They want to give their joints a rest. And the first 4 weeks of the block is running for 30 minutes up to 60 minutes. However, once you have achieved those 3 60-minute runs, you then maintain with one run per week for 30 minutes.
Okay.
So, do you not think a man of your caliber could make that time investment and just forget about the boredom and realize that it's not all about fun, Alec? Sometimes we need to grind, and we don't want to all be having a laugh jumping over fences in our Levi 501.
So, man, if I had a $10 million contract to play whatever the hell sport, then yes, you wouldn't have to sit here and convince me to put a 1 hour investment each week into a little bit of base building style running. But until somebody's writing that check for me, it's maybe I'll dabble at some point to kind of see what happens. But for me, it always has to come back to the fun aspect and the satisfaction aspect, because at the end of the day, I'm doing it for me,
Yeah.
and I have made it into a profession, but like everything that I get out of it is just what I put into it, so like it's excuses. but
No,
but
no,
you know
no.
what I'm
Listen,
saying.
I get it. I get it. I'm just sort of just trying to get a rise out you, so to
Oh,
speak.
that's all good.
But running's actually quite trendy now. I'm noticing there's actually a shift in the fitness sphere because I think the lifting part of fitness is oversaturated. Everybody lifts.
Sure.
So these influencers are probably trying to think, wait, what can I latch on to next? And the thing about running is that once you actually get through that initial couple of weeks, you start to experience that runner's high and it gets quite addictive, almost meditative to a certain degree. So I'm
Okay.
starting to see guys like Alan Thrall and Mark Smelly Bell, they're all starting to run. So it's starting to catch on. But the ironic thing about this whole conversation is that I don't run myself. I very rarely run. Like so.
That was my next question for you.
But it's something I intend to do again at some point. But ultimately, to achieve that response of building that aerobic base, you don't have to run. You can row, you can cycle, you could even possibly do slow duration burpees. But that would probably be really boring for you, Alec.
Potentially.
Is,
Potentially.
have you ever tried? Is burpees something that you've ever implemented into your training program?
Not in any kind of like regimented fashion or programmed in any kind of an intelligent way. It's something that I would do like every now and then. What I'm searching for is what I just call like a one-off training effect. So like if I'm out traveling or something like that. So when say you don't have, for me, like when you don't have access to an ideal situation,
Yeah,
I stop worrying about the larger program and I
yeah,
hone in on the day. So I'm like, today, I just want to achieve this, whatever the goal happens to be. Um, and generally, when you don't have access to a lot of equipment, what you tend to fall back onto is less weight or less heavy weight and more conditioning based concepts, and that's where I
yeah,
would do something like that or something like jumping rope,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah.
So again, not really regimented in any kind of intelligent fashion or anything like that. But
Yeah.
what about you? Like I've gathered that's part of one of your things, right?
Yeah, it's probably my main thing.
Main
It's
thing.
probably my niche, so to speak, is burpee
Okay.
training. But I always like to see if like people do it. Most of the guests that I have on nowadays don't do it. Some probably don't even want to talk about it, and I understand that because the mindset based around burpees is of punishment because it is a particularly brutal exercise. But
Right.
it is what it is. But I want to go back on something that you said earlier that I've kept by, which is when you were speaking at the start and talking about the way you train and the concepts you implement. Is your programming meticulously designed?
For the people who I coach, yes. The programs that you can buy on my website, yes. For myself, no.
Right,
And
okay.
what I do is I do a lot of like at this point I do a lot of like just kind of tweaking around, a lot of experimentation. There is
Yeah,
a there's a general direction that I'm trying to go, but
yeah,
beyond that, I just work within like a framework of things that I either know are going to nudge me in that direction or things that I think are going to nudge me in that direction. And then I just kind of observe, I see what happens, and then with that, I take those ideas and then I distill them into something that makes sense, that creates more of a linear path. And that's the kind of shit that I will sell to people, right?
right,
So
okay.
what I'm doing is basically the way of finding that in my
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that makes sense because if you are programming for people, it does have to be meticulous because people will
opinion.
come to you with a goal in mind, and it's hardly likely you're going to say, "Yeah, just go into the gym and just do what you feel like, just have fun." But don't run, running shit, don't run. But but, but like with regards to yourself, like what is your approach to a training session? Do you have it plotted out to the finest detail, or do you just
No,
go in?
so I have a framework. So if we're talking like not even lift, if we're talking any whatever it happens to be, let's say my main lower body day right now, it's all weight room work, and it's all like categorized basically. So like first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go out and I'm going to hit a heavy squat. I don't care what the squat is. I don't even know what the squat is. I'll sit there in the hours before I intend to work out and I'll go, what do I feel like doing today? And then I'll, from there, whatever sounds the most exciting on that particular day, whatever the hell it happens to be, that's what I'll end up going out and I'll do that, because whatever is exciting me that day is probably what I'm going to excel the most at. So that's all that is. It is go out, work up to a heavy squat. The second thing I do is volume. So I switch after that, after I do the heavy leg work, and I switch to a volume leg exercise. For that, I try to pick something that is less mentally intensive. So let's say I went out, something I'm doing a lot lately for my heavy work is front squats, where you start from the bottom. So the bar is sitting on the pins. I got to wedge myself underneath of it, and I got to stand up with it. I'll do that up to a heavy single.
Yeah.
That's very mentally taxing for me. After that, I want something that is not mentally taxing. So in that case, I've been doing something like, have you heard of a Hatfield squat? You know what that is?
Yeah.
So I'll do something like the Hatfield squat, or I'll do a unilateral leg variation. And in these cases, now I'm going way up in reps and down in load. So now I want to do 10, 15, maybe even 20 reps in a set. That's slot number 2. So heavy work, then volume work. Slot number 3, I'll do a hinge for my hamstrings and my posterior chain, or my glutes, whatever. So in that case, it can be anything. It can be a hyperextension. It can be any variant of a good morning. It can be any variant of a Romanian deadlift. Again, whatever the hell I feel like doing that day. It's not pre-planned. And then after that, I finish up with kind of like ancillary work. So something for my abs. Lately, what I've been doing is trying to remaster the standing ab wheel rollout. And then some of those hip functions. So lately, what I've been doing is direct work for the hip flexors. Those things will, the first 3 exercises will vary from week to week, and then those last 2 will rotate through over the course of every few weeks, kind of deal.
Yeah. So basically, the format is quite rigid, but the exercise selection is fluid. Right. Okay. So
that's something I've. Go ahead.
No, on you go.
I was just gonna say that's something I've talked about a lot in recent history, like on my YouTube channel. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, but I made a video a few months ago basically talking about how the specific exercises that you choose to do basically are irrelevant, essentially, because at least from a strength and hypertrophy perspective, over time, the best results are going to come from mastering as many of these things as you possibly can and implementing as many of them as you possibly can. So like what you see a lot of is paralysis by analysis, where guys want to know, is this squat better than this squat? Is that deadlift variation better than? And it's like, they're all good in their own way. So being as good at as many of them as you can be, in my opinion, is really kind of the way to go. And that's something that I have really, really embraced lately with that conjugate style stuff. It's something I've been talking about a lot the last few years. That's like, I basically wrote a book about conjugate manual with a very regimented type of program, using that exact type of framework that I'm talking about here. So like the guy, whoever uses the program, they get to pick whatever the heck they want to fill in all the slots with, but the framework is all very structured for you. And when you fall into that concept, you really do start to realize that it doesn't really matter what you're doing specifically today. It really only matters what's happening over time, like what the bigger picture is.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I also like to go back to Joe DeFranco, because I was listening to his podcast recently and he was speaking about like what's the best, not the best training method, but ways to get jacked after a certain age or something. And training novelty was something that was mentioned a lot, because he's a big believer in cycling exercises every 3 or 4 weeks, just changing it up constantly. And it made a lot of sense to me, but at the same time, it kind of jars against a lot of the information that's presented. And I can understand why, because we always speak about progressive overload. It's like the principle that's like just rammed down your throat, because obviously it's important. It's a big factor. But a lot of people would argue that it's hard to measure progressive overload if you're constantly changing the exercises.
That's
So
true.
it seems to me that your style of training is quite advanced in this respect. Would you say that your training is geared towards the more intermediate advanced trainer as opposed to the beginner?
I would say that a lot of the stuff that I talk about on my YouTube channel is going to lean more towards intermediate to advanced. But that doesn't. I guess the reason why is because the beginner stuff is just that, it's beginner. So like it's very easy, and I wouldn't implement these concepts, the ones I was just talking about, for anybody who was new. In fact, kind of like almost contradicting myself. one thing that I like to do is I almost like to not force people, but I like to get people to actually milk out all the gains they can get from linear progression style programming
Yeah, yeah.
before switching to something like what I'm talking about now. And because like what one thing you were seeing a few like years ago was a bad mouthing of linear progressions. Like, oh, they don't work. They're too whatever. I don't even remember what the criticisms were, but you were seeing a lot of bad mouthing of it. And it immediately jumped out to me as this doesn't make any sense at all, because I was I was basically what most people would consider advanced or elite or whatever before I had ever deviated from that style of programming myself. And what I found was people just they don't typically implement it correctly. They end up just basically like, I don't know, progressing too fast or not waiving the training loads enough, and they just end up running themselves into a wall. And what you find is when you take one of these guys who is either a late beginner or an early intermediate, 99% of the time, you take him, you make him move 3 steps back, and then you build him back up. And then you wave him back down a little bit, and then you build him back up a little bit higher. And you just keep doing that. And what happens is all of a sudden, this guy who couldn't get past a 225-pound squat is squatting 400 pounds, and you haven't even taken him off of a linear progression yet. You've just modulated shit correctly, and it really makes this like profound difference. So I don't like it when I see people bad mouthing like basic linear progression style programming, because I've seen like what it can do, and it is very predictable. But even within that framework, like I don't typically leave a single exercise in the program for more than 2 to 3 months at a time. Right. So I still will be rotating movements out. And that is even maybe not with an uber beginner, but even with a pretty new trainee, I will still give them that effect. Part of it keeps spurring the progress wheel, and part of it through that novelty effect, and part of it is getting them helping them to master a variety of different movements early on in the game. So now we have this bigger toolbox, right?
Yeah.
For when we do become more advanced. So.
Yeah. So would you say that your style of training or your style of coaching is kind of suited towards those who have an inclination to program hop?
I think it can be helpful for those people, because that's an ailment that you often see.
Yeah.
And when you can get these guys to settle in, like you can help them to exceed what their own expectations are. And maybe part of that is giving them some variety to help keep them interested. But a lot of times, even that even that concept notwithstanding, what happens is, in my experience, once they start to see like, oh shit, we started way down here. I thought this was too easy. But then all of a sudden they're way up here, way ahead of where they ever thought they were going to be. Once that kind of starts to happen, once they actually see that progress kicking in for themselves, that's where you really start to get the buy-in. And then it doesn't even much matter anymore. Once somebody really believes, that's when like shit opens up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, right. So I want to move on a wee bit, Alex, because I want to speak about how I discovered your content, and it was through the Noble Natty community.
Okay.
But at the same time, you seem quite far removed from the Noble Natty community in the style
What
that you
makes you
train.
say?
So why am I finding you through the Noble Natty community while you're training? Microphone. That was a mic drop moment.
It's all good.
Why am I finding your comment through the Noble Natty? Because your name pops up.
So why do you say that? Just out of curiosity, what
Be-
what is the fundamental difference to you that you see?
Because you don't. There's no bodybuilding element to your style of training.
I think
It's all
that's just what.
performance-based Joe DeFranco style. That's the way I envision it. But your name
So
was popping up in comments, and I was seeing, and that's how I found you. That was the funnel.
okay. Honestly, I'll start by saying I don't know. I was like last year or a year and a half ago was the first time I heard that term Noble Natty. Uh, and people were calling me it, and I didn't know where it came from, and I was like, all right, fine, cool, I'm with it, because I see, like, Jeffrey Brady Schofield, the Bald Omni Man, all those dudes, and I'm like, yeah, they're all cool dudes. I'll be in on this group. And I like the concept of not promoting steroid usage, because I
Yeah,
think it's just too much of that. So I was, it was a cool idea. I will admit that I am not really in the same sort of training ideology as most of those guys, but there's a lot of overlap. So,
yeah,
like, maybe not as much so the hypertrophy, at least from the performance standpoint, unless you're starting off like a guy like me, where you were a twig and you do really just need to put some damn size on your frame. But strength and hypertrophy are intertwined. You know what I mean? They're
yeah,
they're inseparably intertwined. So there's
yeah,
always going to be an aspect of those things overlapping, because strength and hypertrophy are intertwined and inseparable, and strength and athleticism are as well. The fundamental basis for improving athleticism is first to improve force production. So you kind of got to master that first part to master that second part from where I'm sitting.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think that kind of creates some of that overlap that you see.
yeah.
If that
It's
makes
almost
sense.
like the Noble Natties are like the Avengers, and everybody's got their own different skill set. And
Yeah,
you've got
yeah, that's
Alex,
one way
it's
to
like
look at it.
it's the
You got your
athletic
own,
type.
yeah, own different superpowers. That's cool. That's a cool way to look at it.
Okay, Alex. So let's talk about your favorite exercises for increasing performance. Okay, what is your go-to lower body exercise for increasing your vertical jump?
uh, it really depends on where the guy is. Let's say it's your typical guy who your typical guy who comes to me. He Once you get kind of funneled into that niche that you see, that Noble Natty niche on YouTube, they're not typically ranked beginners, at least not in my experience. They typically have a little bit of experience in the weight room. So they're like they're working on getting their way to the intermediate stage, or they're in the very beginnings of the intermediate stage. Typically, I gotta just get your legs stronger. It's kind of like first things first. So we're gonna squat, right? Um, Now that can, it's it's a tough question to answer, because it really depends on what the deficiency of the guy, what the deficiency that particular guy has is primarily. Um, I'll just say, I'll keep it as general as I can and just say strength is typically the biggest thing. So we typically will work on leg strength first and foremost. So that's, again, squats. So that's
Okay,
kind
and
of, go ahead. Sorry.
what is the superior squat in your opinion?
The superior, say that again.
What is the superior squat in your opinion?
In terms of what, low bar versus high bar?
Any squat, front squat, Hatfield squat,
Oh
safety bar
man, any
squat.
squat. All right, we're any kind of front squat, dude. Any kind of front squat takes the cake.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't front squat anymore because my wrists are made of glass,
What
and
do you got
I
to do
need
the
to.
zombie squat? You
Yeah,
see
I
me do?
know, but yeah, I could do that actually. It's something that's never crossed my mind. It's just that I need to protect the integrity of my wrists because they take a pounding through high volume burpees. They really do. So to do a squat would be taking me away from my bread and butter in that respect. But I do like a front squat. I always remember the first time I front squatted 2 plates. I used to get trained by this old Scottish Olympic weightlifting coach. He was the hardest guy ever. He was an ex bouncer. He had a moustache. He would wear a cardigan. His name was Stevie McIndoe. If he listens to this, hello, Stevie. And what I'm going to say is two things he did were controversial and probably will get me cancelled for saying this. But one day I walked over the bar in the gym. Like there was an Olympic bar on the rack, and I stepped over it, and he went, "Oh, you come here, come here." That's what they say in Scotland. He went, "Oh, oh." So he's beckoned me over. He's like, "Never step over the bar. Never step over the bar."
That's the rule, man. You don't do that.
I know, but it blew my mind. I was like, "Wow!" He's like, it just there was a symbolic nature to that statement that
Exactly.
really caught my attention. But the
That's like
second one was,
the steel plates, the traditional steel plates. You never
yeah.
load them facing outward. You only load them facing inward.
That's a new one. That's a new one. But the second one was, and this, bear in mind, this guy's a man of his time. But when I initially started, you know, when you first do Olympic weightlifting, it destroys your body for the first week or two. Like the DOMs you have are like
First year
insufferable.
or two.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I had DOMs, and I've went, Stevie, mate, like I'm really sore. I'm really sore. And he went, it's a man sport. And then I was like, right, okay. Like it completely emasculated me. Completely emasculated me. But it worked. I was like, right, okay, I'll never say that again. I'll never say that again. I don't even know how I got on it. Yeah, he taught me how to front squat two plates. He got me doing that through the ferocity of his personality, and it was like a watershed moment for me, more
Right.
so than like doing your first back squat with 2 plates. Like that was just kind of a given, but like a front squat with two front, you just feel that power as you come up because you're
Right.
keeping that torso upright. You're feeling the elbows just flying up. Your upper back's just pumped.
Well, you got to do the zombie squat, man. That's like next level. Because with a front squat, when you got that front rack, you can't cheat too much. You can't like with a back squat, you can go do that. With a front squat, when you have your hands on the bar, you can go a little bit, right? When
Yeah.
you're zombie squatting, if you tip like that, bar is gone. So you're just
Yeah.
perfectly upright. It's the only choice.
Yeah.
It changes
I
it just adds a new element to it.
Yeah, I used to teach the zombie squat actually in one of my barbell classes, just as a coaching cue to get people
That's it.
used
It's a
to.
good learning tool. Yeah.
Yeah, just to get them used to where the bar should be
Exactly.
in
Well, yeah,
terms
because
of
a lot
like,
of people, you put the bar on their shoulders and they think, well, okay, I'm holding this bar in my hands. No, no, you're fucking not. You don't even need your hands. The bar is just sitting right here.
absolutely, absolutely. So listen, Alec, I'm going to have to wrap this up, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm not going to lie, I've had a really good laugh.
Yeah, man. That's a
Uh,
good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I go, Alex, can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
You can find me at OnkiriEliteFitness.com, or you can check out my YouTube channel, which I believe is Onkiri_Elite. You may not have the underscore in there. I'm not sure. But I'm on YouTube, Onkiri Elite Fitness. If you search for me, you'll find me. And then my website's OnkiriEliteFitness.com.
Yeah, and he's forgot to mention he's also on Instagram, and he never answers his
It's,
messages on
I
Instagram. So
answer after like 3 or 4 days. My bad.
so don't contact him through Instagram. But I'll write them in my links. But listen, Alec, that was an absolute pleasure. I'm really happy that this came off. That was superb. I loved it, pal. I loved it.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. We'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, though.